So I keep coming back to the same moment from 8 years ago, watching my dad raise a glass of fine vintage port on the occasion of his 80th birthday. And it was just perfect, oh so worth it. Surrounded by friends and family, and some of those friends he had known for over 70 years, and he was just soaking it all in with pure joy. And the occasion was also a moment of healing for me, as our fairly recent estrangement was fresh in my memory. Neither of us wanted it, but it was a choice that he was forced to make in a desperate attempt to quell the domestic drama going on in his life. Once we got past and through that, we were so relieved, but there were scars, and there still are. So my dad was born in San Francisco in the middle of the Great Depression. And in his early 20s, there was one day, dutiful son that he was helping his mom clear out the apartment of his recently departed great Aunt May. Now, Aunt May for years had worked as the bookkeeper and office manager for the Majestic Bottling Company. That's a cool name. And as part of this job, she would often be gifted bottles of fine wine or spirits, and they just collected dust. So this is how my dad came in possession of one particular bottle of fine vintage port. He thought it was cool. Nobody else wanted it, so it became his. And it traveled with him wherever he went and moved from place to place. And it was always kept in some dark closet somewhere. Well, at some point in the 70s, curious little rugrat that I was digging through some cupboards in the kitchen, and I found this bottle behind a dusty fondue set. And my dad explained to me what it was, and then he told me to put it away, so my curiosity was piqued. Well, at some point in the 80s, marginally responsible teenager that I was, I briefly considered stealing it, taking it to a party, and getting drunk. And miraculously, my better judgment prevailed. So fast forward 30 plus years, and my dad is pushing 80 and I'm pushing 50. And he's beginning to feel his age and his mortality, and he begins to take stock of his worldly possessions, and he considers that, he says he might sell that bottle of port. It may have already turned into fine vinegar. And so I take a look at the bottle, and I note some details, and I do a little research on an online wine auction website, and I don't find the exact bottle, but I find some that seem pretty comparable. And so I note the details, and I tell my dad, what it might be worth. Well, his 80th birthday is fast approaching, and the party planning is in full swing, and this bottle of port comes up again. And I say, Dad, this is your big day. You only turn 80 once. I don't think you should sell it. I think you should serve it at your birthday. And he says, really? I say, yeah, absolutely. So there's researching restaurants and making reservations and fretting over the guest list. Did I mention drama? And finally his big day arrives. And so 40 friends and family arrive at a restaurant on the peninsula south of San Francisco. And the grins are ear to ear as his childhood buddies come through the door, and the chat is back and forth about epic stickball games in their old Jersey Street neighborhood, and hip replacements and other ailments, and friends that have since passed on. And it was just a lovely time. And so as the meal is winding down, I pull the waiter aside to have a little chat. And I had told them I was going to bring this bottle of port to have for dessert, but I didn't really give any other details. And so I didn't want to insult this person's intelligence, but I really wanted them to understand how special this bottle of port was before handing it over. So, judging by the look on his face, my amateur wine-splaining definitely came across like I was a jackass. So what are you going to do? So I give him the bottle, and my dad pulls out a little printed note, and he holds forth with a little birthday speech, and he gives thanks, and he itemizes all of his life's blessings, much like an accountant would itemize something. And I just stand back, and I love it that he can just be his big-hearted type A self. I mean, it was really lovely. And so then when he finishes, the waiter comes back with a tray of tiny port glasses and the bottle, and he begins to serve everybody. And I look at that little glass of port, and I think about where it's been. I wonder if it's soured into vinegar. And I raise that glass and give a toast to my dad. Happy birthday, Dad. We all love you so much. À votre santé. And he raises his glass and takes a sip, and it's perfect. His face just melts into this warm smile. And it was so lovely. Now, there's some details that I haven't shared with you about this port. It was bottled the same year that the Confederacy finally breathed its last breath. It was bottled in the same year that former slaves first got the right to vote in this country. The president was actually Ulysses S. Grant. The telephone hadn't yet been invented. This bottle of port was bottled in 1870. It was 144 years old. So what was it worth? Well, turns out that my estimate that I gave my dad was confirmed 2 weeks later when he actually got to visit the same winery in Portugal where it was bottled. And he showed them an image of the label, and they were amazed. It turns out that just a few years earlier, the last 4 known bottles of that vintage had been auctioned off for $5,000 each. So that sip that lit up my dad's face, that was a $50 sip. That glass of port that I raised in honor of my dad, that was a $400 glass of wine. And that bottle, with any luck at auction, the highest bidder would have taken it home for $10,000. So, was it worth it? Well, having that opportunity to spend time with my dad and just love him and watch him share in so much joy, it was absolutely worth it. It was precious, it was perfect, it was priceless. Thank you.